I always say, like, if I were to just remove those factors, right? So for you guys, if you were never to be judged again, if failure was not an option and money was not an option or not a problem, what would you do? All right, what is up? Episode 8, A Pursuit of Balance. We're going to talk about a fun one today. We're going to talk about how to live a badass life. I had a lot of good feedback on, the achievement trap years and, how to enjoy your job and kind of some of those things. And personally, for me, it's just kind of a reminder of how much also I just enjoy talking about that stuff because, like last week, the last couple weeks, actually, I've talked about nutrition. And I love obviously tying as much of the health space in there between physical training and, nutrition, but really something that I've grown to just like more and more over time is just talking about some of the kind of the lifestyle pieces, right? Like, how do we really live a life where we don't have a lot of stress, right? How do we live a life where we have a lot of enjoyment, where we live with intention, you know, where we're courageous, where we're happy, like we have all these things that just make life what it's supposed to be, right? So I broke this up into 8 sections, right? And I want to kind of go through all 8, and I kind of broke it up into a little balance of like some science, some psychology, and really just a lot of grit and work that's going to take to actually make that life happen. Because the one reminder I will give you is living a happy life or a badass life or being happy is not easy inherently, right? Because unfortunately, what we're set up to do as humans, as far as the convenience and access to food, or the convenience and access to technology, and the social isolation with remote work and technology, like, I think the world is kind of just evolving in this way where it's making it easier to become lazier. It's making it easier to just like fall in bad habits. And, when you think about living this intentional life, it's not something that really is like comes natural to a lot of us, right? So first one is you got to get super, super clear on what you actually want out of life, right? And this is when you think about like just planning. I think a lot of people live in this like default life versus a designed life. And this is where planning, on a quarterly, a monthly, a weekly, an annual, a decade perspective, like you need to figure out, like, with you or your family or just yourself, ideally first, like, what is it for you that makes your life a badass life, right? Like, if you were to think about, how do I create the most badass life? How do I create a life that I'm just looking forward to, that I'm excited to wake up for every single day, right? And I think the number one thing is, like, you need to remember that, like, our goals are aligned with personal values that lead to more life satisfaction, right? Meaning, like, when our goals are aligned for what we want, not what we think other people are going to think of us, or what our parents want, or what our significant other wants, or those things, then it becomes outside of ourselves. Like, we want the value and the motivation to be intrinsic, right? We want you to be the person that's excited about it. So a line that I wrote down is like, if money and judgment or failure does not exist, how would I spend my days, right? And I think about this all the time, right? And I would say this is probably one of my favorite little thoughts at night, right? It's just my little idea of like, okay, if I didn't have to think about money ever again, right? I personally think I don't deal with as much judgment or failure thoughts personally, but I know it's something that's brought up a lot with people just around me, clients, things like that, why people are obviously taking, or not taking action on what they actually want out of their life. But for me, I do think about, like, I've always was like money hungry as a kid. I wanted to make sure that I built a life that I could afford to do whatever the hell I wanted. The older I've gotten, the more I've realized that, like, the things that I do need really, like, I don't really have these crazy, crazy goals as far as financial needs. I just think I have crazy, crazy goals on this need for growth, right? And that would coming through a byproduct of obviously giving yourself money. But, like, I always think, like, if I were to just remove those factors, right? So for you guys, if you were never to be judged again, if failure was not an option and money was not an option or not a problem, what would you do? Right? Like, how would you spend every single day, right? Write that stuff down. Think about what those days look like. Think about what those weeks look like. Think about what your job looks like. Think about where you would be living, right? Write all these things down, because the more intentional you can be with it, the better. And then the biggest thing, reverse engineer it backwards, right? If I want to be here in 10 years, 50 years, and a lot of people have trouble planning that far. And also another argument that I like to give people is, like, I don't think that planning so far in advance is also necessarily something you need to be spending a lot of mind share towards, because in reality, it's the most important thing is to be present, right? But an annual reflection, right? Of where am I going with my goals this year? Like take the time. And I think one of the beautiful things about like the New Year's resolution, a lot of people like to shit on it, but I think honestly, it's a great opportunity unconsciously for a lot of us to just kind of plan forward. But I want you to make sure that not only planning forward, but also reflecting backwards. Like learn from what happened, right? When I get to, Jan 1 of 26, I'm going to be like, what did I do really well in 25? What did I enjoy? What do I want to do more of? What do I want to do less of? Okay, now when I go to plan 26, okay, cool. Now let's figure out exactly how I can make that roadmap. And then, doing those annually, but then also you need to have a bigger picture. Something on the business side of things that I was thinking about I was talking about this to my wife when we were in Tahoe, however long ago that was, like a month. And I was like, babe, I was like, for me, I've always loved the gym business because I like business, but I also, more importantly, like I like the gym. I like fitness, I like health, I like making people happier and better and, healthier versions of themselves. One thing I also really personally have grown to enjoy is just like prioritizing experiences and vacations and time either with my wife or with my friends or with my family. Like, doesn't matter if it's like a small thing like golfing on a Wednesday with my parents or if it's going on a week vacation or going to Italy, how I am next month, things like that. Like, prioritizing those experiences. I'm like, how could I? And of course, business brain goes there. I was like, how can I do that for other people? And that's why I was like, I think like boutique hotels or Airbnb, even like, I think I want to get into that because I would love to selfishly monetize a little bit of something that could afford to pay for itself or even make some money. But then also like give myself the experience of like if I had an Airbnb in Tahoe that had some bikes or I had a paddle board, I had things at the cabin. I think it would be so cool because you're giving experiences. I mean, selfishly, I'm looking at this myself first, but then like for other people, for their families want to go there. I really, really have always been intrigued by like the idea of like these health retreats or like doing things where you get people together, where you have like good food or you have, surfing or you have biking or you have runs, like having a place for people to stay, but also be able to share likely things, right? Okay, so that's number one. Number two, you got to build an anti-fragile body and mind. I cannot tell you the importance or underestimate the importance of this, but so many people forget that the best way to a good life is by having good emotional kind of intelligence, right? Having good mental resilience. The mental health side of things, like I said, I talk about a lot more and more and more over time. But what people forget about, I'm sorry, is that the best way to the brain is through the body, right? So there is like, I always like to say that like most badass people in life, like it's not that they're never struggling. They just choose to embrace the struggle, right? So it means that stress and challenges are going to be things that are going to make you stronger. So instead of thinking about how do I avoid these things, don't invite them necessarily. Like, I'm not trying to make my life harder, but when things do become hard or challenging or difficult, you need to remind yourself that, hey, 99% of the world would never do this. And this is why 99% of the world is not where you want to be, right? And I say that for you, not me, that you need to figure out for your life. You don't need to view around what everyone else expects or wants, right? You need to view like, okay, the things that I do want to create this life that I want, they're going to be struggles and you're going to have difficulties. You're going to have obstacles, right? In order for you to get to where you want to go, you need to go through those. You need to go over those. So embrace that struggle, right? Understand that that is a part of the journey. I mean, that's what makes you a badass, right? So train your body with obviously so the strength work, the mobility work, the cardio. Like, the thing that I love about training is because when I know I'm tired on a run or I know I'm tired in the gym, the ability to push myself one extra rep or one extra mile, the ability to do mobility when I really am not in the mood to do it, I want to skip it. Those are things that are basically just building the discipline and building the habits that I am used to hard work and I can do it. And also it basically reinforces the ability for the body to go, oh, okay, we are capable of do this because the mind is what's going to want to give up first. The body has a lot more. So I think building the body or building the mind comes through the body, right? So train your mind to exposure to discomfort. This is why I like doing things that are difficult, right? So I think about sauna, I think about cold plunge. I even put public speaking for me because I hate public speaking, which is interesting when people talk about they're like, oh, you own a group training facility. You don't like talking in front of a group. I'm like, dislike it. But I know that learning that skill or becoming more comfortable with that skill over time, I've learned to just become more comfortable with it, but I'm still uncomfortable, right? And that's one thing you need to remember is like, in order to really, really get what you want in life, in order to get what most people don't have in life, you need to do what most people are skipping, right? You need to do what most people aren't wanting to do, right? So learning new skills, right? Or whatever it might be, but like embrace that discomfort, right? And then just have these little micro doses of, exposure, right? Because when you think about this is like that adaptation is going to be a mental and a physical thing, right? So, what was the term I was looking for? No, whatever. I don't need to worry about that. But the brain adapts to the challenges and the muscles adapts to load, right? And this was also a little quote that I saw was good. So like progressive overload is something we talk about in training, but progressive overload is something that deals it's in every aspect of life, right? In order for you to get stronger or faster, you need to do more weight or more time or whatever it might be. You just need to progress overload, right? And that could be a volume, that could be a weight, that could be an intensity factor. But when you think about that with work, when you think about that with life, when you think about that with your relationships, like it's the same thing. You need to progressively overload it in order to see growth, right? The reason why a lot of flatline in the relationship, right? A reason why a lot of people flatline in their work is because they're stopped progressively overloading it, right? So think about that term is something that you apply to every aspect of your life. Next one, protect your energy like it's your last dollar in your wallet, right? For me, I think this is probably the thing that most people screw up the most. And a lot of times we unfortunately use avoidance as the only answer to do that. And I think that's also kind of like both sides of the conversation, right? So boundaries are obviously the ultimate form of self-respect, right? Like you need to form boundaries for what you expect from your life. And more importantly, for the goals that you have set out, how are you going to achieve those things? Now, the one thing you need to remember is depending on the timeline of the goal. If you're playing the long game and you are okay with achieving a goal 10 years from now or 30 years from now, you are going to be really, really successful, right? The people that really want things really, really fast have to set more extreme boundaries in order to achieve it, which unfortunately end up falling back in this loop of basically extreme version of doing something, failure, jumping off the bandwagon, and then just repeating the cycle over and over. The ones that are able to invest a little bit of money over a very long period of time end up becoming really rich. The ones that are able to work out with a little bit less intensity more frequently for a very long time have the best bodies, right? The ones that are able to eat at 70 or 80% of a perfect diet every day or every week, like you get the drift here, right? It's like stop trying to do so much so fast because that's just going to make this extreme variation of it. But now the thing to remember is like energy is your currency, it's your life force. And if you're giving your energy to the wrong things, right? And this is why, I wrote one of the things is I said saying no without an apology, right? Like I think over time that's been something I've gotten a little bit better with, right? Like I used to always have to feel like I needed to explain myself. When I was younger, I said yes to going out to everything. Doesn't matter who it was, acquaintance, a friend, a family member. We're going to a party, we're doing this thing. Yeah, sure, I'll be there. And then there was this period where I started saying no more often, but I had a hard time saying no. So I would either like ghost people or say no with just like I would explain myself. And you don't need to explain yourself. You're just like, no, I don't want to do it, or no, I can't do it, right? Like I think you need to make sure that you understand that like your boundaries are your energy are dictated by the boundaries you set, right? So the more strict you can be with those boundaries, the more you can protect your energy. Now, to be mindful of other people, like for me, it's like I say yes sometimes when I'm tired to go see my friends, or I go see yes sometimes when I go see my family or my parents or my wife's family, or obviously do something with my wife, because those are important things for me that I need to remember and also realize that like that is something that is not going to be forever, right? Well, I would love to say those things would be forever, but sometimes they're not, right? So, there's obviously flex to it, but I think obviously protecting it. So, attention, limiting distractions. First thing I wrote down here is like, I talked about this a little bit last week, but I think about, one of the biggest distractions that I personally deal with is the phone. I think like social media or, TV, I think is a little bit of a distraction, but sometimes just something for me to like fall asleep to. But we all have different distractions in different areas, right? And whatever that is for certain people, you need to remember that, like, take the time to step back to kind of evaluate what are these distractions in my life that are actually slowing down, like, the rate of my results or success, or just taking me away from it completely. Number two, time, design your week around your priorities. That's a huge piece to it because, like, getting your attention back is basically just like kind of refilling the tank with energy. But then when you think about the allocation of your time, you need to make sure that you're allocating it towards the things that make you excited, towards the things that are going to move you closer to your goal. And this is why for me, like I've really over time kind of set boundaries with work. I used to work, 10, 12 hours a day in the gym. And I realized by the time I got home, I never had time to work on the business. And for me, one of the things that's hard is like mentally, I want my team and like my coworkers to think like, oh, he works really, really hard, even though he's a business owner. And I feel like I needed to show him that in person to do that. But what I realized is I was actually hindering the success of my business by doing that, because the more I worked in the business, the less energy and time I had to work on the business. So finding this balance and setting a boundary for myself of like, yeah, I'll allocate 4 to 6, maybe 8 hours a day of in-person work where I'm in the gym, but then the other work I need to be doing like at home. And it doesn't matter if it's payroll or if it's marketing or if it's hiring or if it's interviewing. And those are things that are like behind the curtains that most people don't see. And I always struggle with that. But the more I prioritized over time, what is the thing that I really, really want to do that makes me effective at what I do, but more importantly, and the most important thing is the thing that I enjoy the most, right? And that's a hard thing because I think a lot of people, there's a lot of, battle between the needs and wants in life of like, oh, I want to do this, but like in order to do that, I need to do that. So like trying to find the balance of that, but really, obviously evaluating that. Emotional bandwidth, I think this is something as any manager, leader, or parent really deals with, or in relationships, that if my team's not doing good, or my wife's not happy, or my family's not happy, or like anything, right? It doesn't matter if it's happy or not. It could be stressed. It could be something going on. You tend to take that emotional baggage with you. And that is also another energy drainer. So when you think about this, it's like, number one, we need to prioritize avoiding distractions so we get our attention back so we can actually be more efficient. Number two is I need to prioritize where I'm allocating my time. And number three, I need to make sure that I'm like obviously aware of the emotional bandwidth that I'm able to give to people, and prioritizing, more importantly, like what I'm able to give back by also giving back to myself and protecting that as well. Number four, master the stress and recovery cycle, right? Badasses don't avoid stress, they use it strategically, right? And the other thing I wrote down is basically like, I love this like seasonal kind of cyclical approach to life of like having sessions or periods or seasons of really, really intense work, but then also having seasons of just a lot of intentional recovery and relaxing. With my job, obviously running a business, I think I get that inherently, organically, without even trying. Like beginning of the year, it's like, cool, I'm opening up a business, right? Or I'm opening up a new location for Palo Alto. It's like I still have my normal schedule. I'm still running my 2 locations. I still have my 17 people in my team. I still have my PT clients, but I also now need to allocate more times towards going to the city. I need to allocate more time to go meet with the contractors. I need to allocate more time for buying equipment. I need to be there. I need to set those things up. I need to build it out. So it was a season that was just fucking nuts, right? And like this year, honestly, it's just been a season of a lot of that, because like went from that, then we went from the wedding, and then now it's finally like I feel like I'm in a season where I get to recover or like slow it down a little bit. But utilize that cyclically. Understand that that's just going to be a part of it, right? Which is like without recovery, effort just becomes burnout, right? Number 5, you got to play the long game. I just touched on this in the beginning of this episode. I think one of the biggest mistakes is we're looking for short-term satisfaction. A lot of what I was talking about last week's episode is like your brain is hardwired that way. It wants the immediate dopamine hit. It wants the immediate satisfaction. It's hard for you to realize that the effort that's required to do something for a long period of time or delay gratification is much easier to read about and think about or say it than it is to actually apply it to our lives. But compounding just applies to everything, right? From an investment perspective, it's like I said the last week, I think it's like, if you were to just invest a little bit of money at a very young age for a long period of time, you'd be very well off at the end of your life. But the problem is most of us don't think about our 60s when we're in our 20s. So we don't compound. We don't use that compounding interest to become really wealthy, right? And it's the same thing with our relationships. It's the same thing with our finances. It's the same thing with our health. It's like the idea of compounding over time is really what's going to make you super successful with what you do in your life. It's not the really, really intense short burst and then I'm done, right? Because like I mentioned, that's what leads to burnout. That's what leads to quitting. That's what leads to this cycle of like intensity, quitting, right? So going back and forth. So don't trade your long-term joy for short-term dopamine is basically the easiest takeaway from that one. 6, choose courage over comfort, right? Comfort crisis. I forget who the author of this book is. It's where I got this section from for me. I honestly, probably a top 5, top 10 book for me. It basically just talks about how we live in this just a world that creates comfort, right? Convenience of ordering food, the convenience of like being able to do everything on our phone, the convenience of when it's hot, I put my AC on, the convenience of just trying to always choose comfort. You need to choose courage. You need to choose that understanding that once you can change, like for me, I love hard things. I love a hard workout. I love a hot day. But I only got there by doing that thing consistently until it became a habit. And I realized that that habit created the success that I was looking for. So it made it easier for me to mentally reinforce why that was so important for me. So when you think about choosing courage, like just what are the little things that you can do every single day? Like the idea of let's take the stairs instead of the elevator, right? Like let's park at the end of the parking. Like those little habits that people like laugh at and think they're jokes. Like those are little micro habits that you're doing to reinforce the brain and develop a habit of like, I will always choose the little bit more of a difficult route. And it's not difficult to work harder just to work harder, right? Like this is an argument that I wouldn't say argument. This is a conversation I like tend to tell my parents a lot of like my parents worked super, super hard their entire life and became really, really successful with their business and most things in life because they worked hard. And I grew up, unconsciously taking that in that hard work is going to get you where you want to be in life. And I cannot agree any more than that. But what I will say is also worked really, really hard to become really, really smart so I can work smarter and harder at the same time. And the smarter I worked, the more efficient I was. The smarter I worked, the more energy I had to become even smarter to work harder in other areas. So I think it's like this, like being specific with the allocation of the energy that you put into towards things of like, yeah, you need to work hard. Yeah, you need to make things difficult in order to see success, but you also can work really, really smart. So the courage over comfort thing is like understand that that comes in every aspect of life. Like cooking is much harder than door dashing. Exercising is much harder than sitting on the couch, right? Like all these little habits that you're creating, but understand the more habits that you're building towards comfort, the more comfort is something that's appealing to you. And the more comfort is just a habit. It's much easier to do nothing than it is to do something. But until you start getting in the act of doing something consistently, you're going to really have a hard time getting out of that, right? Surround yourself with people that level you up. I mean, if you want to have a badass life, the most important thing I think is your people around you, right? And this is where you need to become picky with the people, right? There are a bunch of people in life that unfortunately are going to be not on the same wavelength as you, right? They do not have the same goals as you. They choose mediocrity, right? They are energy drainers. They gossip about things. There's a lot of people in life, unfortunately, and this is why I make a podcast like this, so you could not be that person if you are, that choose to complain about things, that choose to be a victim around things. Now, as a person that's trying to shape a life to be badass and be optimal for yourself, you need to understand that you need to be picky around those type of people because when you surround yourself around people that are happy, happy-go-lucky, always in a good mood, motivated about success, always exercising, motivated about work, whatever it is, right? Like I can give you a bunch of different examples. Those have such a dramatic influence on you and your success and your well-being and your happiness that it almost feels like a cheat code, right? The hardest part about this though is like if you've had a relationship with somebody, a friend from elementary school, we just been friends for so long, we see each other. It's hard because you've had such a long relationship and maybe a good relationship, but if that person is an energy drainer to you or is taking you away from your goals, that's someone unfortunately like you need to set boundaries with and like limiting the exposure to, right? Because just like any other distraction, that is a personal distraction, right? It doesn't matter if it's you Instagram's doom scrolling or if it's you hanging out with somebody that's taking you away from your goals because they gossip or they drink too much or whatever it might be. Those are going to be obviously negative impacts on it, right? So next one, the last one, leave a dent on the universe. I think this is for me, just kind of the last part that I wrote down is like trying to find purpose with what you do is this self-fulfilling prophecy that we all have as humans that like living a badass life requires you being selfish more times than selfless, unfortunately, right? Like you have to do more things that are aligned for what you want. But my always philosophy has been you cannot pour from an empty cup, meaning that you need to first be selfish before you can be selfless. In order for me to give back to the community, in order for me to coach my clients, in order for me to work with my coworkers, in order for me to like whatever it is, I had to first take the time to go through it myself at an individual level. I had to first take the time to dedicate time towards education to learn those things, right? So understand that like when I say leave a dent in the universe, one of the most impactful things that you can do as a human is giving back to other people, right? Raising really, really good kids for me is a super exciting thing that I'm looking forward to with my wife and I, right? Having a really good relationship with my wife, super important to me, right? Having a job that I like, that makes money, that makes it as successful, that allows coaches to make money, that allows clients to be healthier, that allows me to make enough money to live a life that my family can, afford to live. Super important to me. But also doing things in the grand scheme of like this podcast that I pay money for. I don't get paid to do this podcast. I pay for this podcast. Like I choose to invest in this for the people that are listening to this, right? And it doesn't matter if it's 10 people or 10,000 people or a million people, wherever this thing ever goes, that it fills my cup, hopefully hearing that people get something good out of this podcast, that it makes an impact on them, that it allows them to make a choice to move forward. So when I say leave a dent in the universe, like do things to help your community, do things that help the world out. We need more love. We don't need more fear. We don't need more depression. We don't need more anxiety and like stress. Like we live in a world where people are just cultivated around just talking about crap all the time. So you want to live a badass life, go through those 8 sections, understand that you are the person that is empowered to do so. You are the person that has the keys to your life. And if you want to live a badass life, the first thing you need to do is figure out what that life looks like and then go through all those things that I just talked about. Hope you guys enjoy. I will see you guys next week. Take care.